Sportsline Podcast is rolling, and as always, we appreciate you checking us out today. I'm your host, Bubba O'Neill. Friends, as you know, this pod loves to promote the Golden Horseshoe's outstanding athletes, coaches, executives, and teams. Now, with that in mind, and with the Toronto Maple Leafs in total tank mode, the other local team in these parts are certainly worth talking about in a major way.
Niedermeyer sliding it on to Roy. His pass off Boys and tipped back in the other direction. Sabres changing. Here's Leno taking the shot. He scored! Leno ripped that one into the top of the net, and the Flyers have a 4-0 lead.
April 26, 2011, and the Sabres are eliminated in the Eastern Conference quarterfinals in 7 games after a 5-2 loss to the Flyers. We did not know it then, but Lindy Ruff's last dance as head coach a year later would include 14 seasons of not making the postseason, along with numerous changes on the bench and in the front office.
Following up on the play, Rasmus Dahlin. Nice pass. Here's McLeod holding it to the slot. Scores! What a blast! Quinn slides on his keister after scoring another one here tonight, and it's 5-2.
Fast forward many years later, and Jack Quinn is recording a hat trick. The Sabres beat the Sharks 6-3 last night for a franchise record second 8-game win streak of the season. Buffalo lead the Atlantic Division this late in a season for the first time in years, and for the first time since 2011, no doubt, they're going to the playoffs. For more on this magical story, let's bring in the voice of the Buffalo Sabres, Dan Dunleavy. Dan, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. How are you? I was getting a little worried there. You started off with a bit of a negative, but I realized where the flashback was starting and leading to, so it's all good.
It really has to be good. And really, can I double down on this? Because as a fan, I have no problem being a fan, a total fandom throughout all of this. But as a broadcaster, you really have to be one of the happiest men in the National Hockey League after seeing all you've seen over the years.
You know what's really nice, actually, to not make it? I know the question is about me or our broadcast crew, but the reaction and the nice words we're getting from other broadcasters around the league and our fellow broadcasters around the league is, I'd say for the most part, it's pretty nice. There still are some that are, they don't really want us in it because it means they're out. So, you feel that a little bit, but I'd say, 98% of the guys and the gals around the league that are part of broadcast crews are, they're coming with some nice words for us and realizing that it's been a long time. It's my 13th year here with the team and certainly have not experienced this in Buffalo before. I've experienced it, as you mentioned, as a fan, as a viewer, as a listener, as a young kid growing up. I've mentioned many times in numerous conversations over the last 48 hours how the very first voice I ever heard call a hockey game in my house was Ted Darling, just because of growing up in Southern Ontario and those games being an over-the-air production on television when we were kids. So to flash back to those sounds and trying to, even at a very young age, wonder what it would be like to be Ted Darling and be in a building like the Odd and have those kind of moments, to have it happening after 13 years, sharing the booth with RJ and watching and learning and realizing that there are some iconic moments in the past. But as a broadcaster, you want to maybe provide an iconic moment or two for a future generation. And that's really up to the team. And they've done a nice job here, as you know, over the last stretch to give us an opportunity to do that going forward.
When we look at these current standings right now of where the teams sit right now, I think there was a time, when I was kind of doing a lot of scoreboard and, standings watchings. I was hoping for the team to settle in as a strong wild card contender in the Eastern Conference. Dan, they sit atop the Atlantic right now and seemingly show no signs of slowing down.
Yeah, you got to be around it really to see what's happening here. I mean, to see it and just tune into it now, we're glad for it. to have seen where this started this year, which was not a great start, right? The first 4 games out of the gate until they got traction in a game where they scored 8 goals. I think it might have been the 4th game into the season. And then you saw, okay, there it is. And then it didn't stick around on a regulation win basis time after time again. But once that December 9th date came around in Edmonton, once there was the change, atop the hockey operations with the new general manager, for whatever reason, and I put this on the players, I say it all the time, I sound like a broken record, but to me it is on the guys in the room. It's their room. It's up to them to create the environment they want to compete in. And if they want to win, then they have to do everything right. You can't do just 2 or 3 things right. You have to do everything. So what I'm seeing with this team is winning is obviously helping the attitude around the group, but the work that's been put in behind the scenes this year, and I think the attention to detail has been so much more when I say intense, I just mean focused is maybe a better word, a better focus. And that's not to suggest guys weren't focused before on playing their best hockey, on being the best version of themselves, but they found a way to be the best version of a team. And I think last night was a great example. You showed the highlights there of Jack Quinn. It had been 12 games since Jack Quinn, who's a shooter and a goal scorer, had scored a goal. But he has a coming out night thanks to his play by his defense and his teammates, getting the puck to the forwards and then working with McLeod and Zucker, which has been a great line. So, it's not one guy, it's everybody. And I think that's the beauty of this. And you and I have talked before. I have had the chance to be around some winning teams in a National Lacrosse League with Toronto for years, where they obviously had really good players, but they still had to get all those personalities to buy into the same plan, the same game plan, and the same way of playing. Hockey Canada, with my World Junior experience, when they went off and they won 5 straight, you had to have players come into the program that were on the same page, the same plan. If you weren't going to make the team. So I'm seeing and feeling that now. These guys they're all on the same plan. They're all extremely different people, which is amazing. I love it. The personalities are outstanding. They're different birds, all of them, but they've come together and they're doing it for one another. And last night was another good example.
I don't think it's as simple as this, and this is why I would love talking to you in a situation like this. When we look at the month-by-month standings, all right, there was a time in the fall where many people were like, hey, Buffalo may be a team that does something. And then, there's October, and then there's obviously November. And the feeling was, same old Sabres. And I know I got to dig deeper on you, and I got to push you harder on this one. But what changed? And the reason why I say that is because, look, I understand. Look, Kevin Adams is probably a really good guy. You probably know him personally. Maybe he's a friend. But it seemed like the change of general manager, and he's not on the ice, either of those general managers. But it all seemed to coincide with the change of general managers. Is there anything to this?
Well, to the first part of your comment, from a human nature point of view, for anyone, including us at times, certainly on the broadcast over the last number of years, Rob Ray and I, we would sit on the plane, our entire broadcast crew, and traveling, as the seasons were going well, we would think, oh, here we go again, right? We'd get to a point in the season where you started to drop further out of the race, where you thought, well, we're going to have to paint the narrative that, again, you're building, which they were, building young, talented draft picks to be one day the future fabric of this team. So this year, when things, as we talked about and you mentioned, at times were kind of gaining traction and then not, and then kind of gaining, and we're picking up points but not regulation wins, I understand the easiness to fall into the same old Sabre routine. And I think, and you're mentioning the general manager, the decision to change the general manager from Kevin DeArmo, I think at some point the players had a discussion amongst themselves. I mean, they're together all the time. The discussion has to be, when are we going to do something about this, right? Now, a general manager has lost his job, someone that brought all of us in who believed we could do the job. No matter what anyone else thinks of how things went, at the end of the day, it's up to us, because now he's put us here and we have to do the job. So I really think it's as simple as the guys are more mature hockey players. I will not ever overlook, and no matter where this goes, the experience, and this is only one leader of many, because there's so many. I mentioned the fabric of this team it's woven by many different pieces of thread. But Tage Thompson scoring an overtime game-winning goal for his country at the World Hockey Championships, and then making the Olympic team, and then being part of that accomplishment in a thriller of a game against Canada in the recent Olympic Games, to bring that back to the room. And I don't mean to bring the gold medal back and show it off to teammates, because there are Canadian players and Swedish players and Finnish players, Finnish general managers on the team. But to bring back that sense of, I want more as a player. And the only way Tage gets more is if he plays with everybody else, not alone as Tage Thompson. I'm not saying he ever did, but I'm saying he now brings that ability. It's not only on Rasmus Dahlin, who's all first-time experiences for all these guys. Not one guy has to drag a guy into the fight. They have to drag each other into the fight, and there's a hunger and there's a thirst. So to your point, it's easy to fall into the here we go again. But the team is older. There's still a lot of very high draft picks in this group. They've got a veteran coach that you can just tell has read the pulse of the room, whether he's in Lindy Ruff, been in the room more or less, whether he's saying more or less, you'd have to ask the players that. But there's no doubt that Lindy's message has remained the same. It's remained solid about rules that you have to play by in order to have success in this game. And the guys are following those rules. And a lot of those rules are really off the ice rules. They're mental, how you treat your teammates, how you stick up for one another, all those little things. So you can't put your finger on one. You can't put your finger on one thing. When you go from last in the Atlantic to first in the Atlantic, you can't say it's one thing. It's a cumulative, and it's added up to where they're at today. So the other good thing is this team is standing in their shoes where they are today. But they're not. They realize what looks like is ahead of them, but every comment still is, we haven't earned anything yet. So,
you know, I'm glad you brought up Tage, and I want to bring up a board. And I mean, you can't name every player, but I'm going to bring up three players who, you know, that I think just are amazing to me. And I'm glad you brought up Tage and really his sort of maturity. We've always known him as a scorer. We always know that he's been, you know, a highly elite offensive-like player. But are you seeing anything different in him in terms of his play? I mean, he's look at him, he's almost 20 minutes a night. Is there anything that you're seeing that he's changed in his game?
I'm going to use the word mature again, but I started seeing it not just this year. I started seeing it definitely last year, and I think it's been creeping into his game for a while, is the completeness of where the play starts. And I can see it, and I don't remember exact games, but I remember the moments when I would be calling it, looking down. I can see it now to my left, and Tage is the forward back, helping retrieve the puck below the goal line in his own end, and then starting the play, and then eventually being the finish of the play. And, you know, you look back to Don Granato when he was coaching this team, how he would use Tage as a winger and a center, and Lindy Ruff has done the same thing. I think the ability for Tage Thompson to play both roles and understand the difference in those roles, the difference in the responsibilities, have helped him greatly. And in any situation now on the ice, Lindy can put Tage Thompson and he can succeed. Tage killing power plays at one point at the top of the blue line was happening and using his reach for a little while. It doesn't happen as much now because you've got McLeod and Tuck that are doing that. But it's the completeness of Tage's game. He's even, listen, he doesn't have to run people over, but he's a big body, and he just has to show up. And he's starting to do that as well. I mean, it's everything. So, you know, it's a complete buy-in. Tage, like anyone else, is willing to drop down and block a shot, even when the team's up 5-3 late in the game. When you think they're good with a 2-goal lead, they're still dropping the block shot. So it takes many to lead a team, and I think the first guy that steps up and starts leading, when you look at your captains and your guys who are wearing letters, when they start doing it, and you have a group that's this tight, then they all feel that they can take turns leading. So I give Tage a lot of credit for that. I remember all the work he put in when he was injured, when he first came here with that deal from St. Louis, and just trying to get healthy. I can see him running the steps at the rink. I can see him putting all that work in that nobody ever saw. And every athlete does it. I get it. It's nothing new. But those who do it usually get rewarded, and that's happening for him.
I'm glad you brought up leadership, because Rasmus Dahlin was given leadership of this club relatively at a young age when he came into the National Hockey League, and much was expected of him. You know, many people saying he's the next Lidstrom or Hedstrom, like Hedman, like that kind of pressure was on him. You know, but when I look at him, you know, in his media responsibilities, and I remember an end of the season availability last year where he looked depressed. There was a time earlier this year I thought he was depressed, and then just a couple of weeks ago he said something to the media, and I think it might have been to Paul Hamilton, about we're for real. And like you could see this big smile on his face, and a guy that has seen it all from all levels, because he's been relatively healthy, and a guy that's been looked at as a guy that's supposed to be a game changer, he has to be really, really personally happy to be the leader of the Buffalo Sabres.
Well, Rasmus has been here when some pretty talented players didn't want to see this through, and they wanted to go elsewhere. And they had, you know, as adults and human beings, every right to make their own decisions, and some of them went on to great success. Rasmus was one guy who definitely, I'm pretty sure some fans were hoping this would turn at some point, so he wouldn't be the next player to say, look, I'm doing all I can here. I need some help. And that help was eventually going to show up in the form of just growing up as a team, growing up together. And we always talked about that here in Buffalo, because the memories, as you even open this show with, was all about what happened in the past in Buffalo. And what happened in the past, you had a group of players coming up through the American Hockey League, making the jump into the NHL, playing together, understanding one another, just being a tight-knit group there for one another. And, you know, that's what's happening now with some call-ups even this year. But for Rasmus, let's keep in mind, again, I know I always go here, but I think it matters. From the very human aspect, I can't even imagine what he has been going through personally in his life. And
that's right.
Just dealing with that, let alone the pressures of ending a 14 or, you know, stopping a 14-year, preventing it from getting to a 15-year playoff drought for a hockey crazed city that's waiting to explode again. So, you know, any night that Rasmus, for example, or any player I think it's a really good reminder for all of us who get hyped up about this, is that, I know we say it all the time, these people are human beings, but when you actually hear the stories about what they're going through, I can't put myself in Rasmus's and his family's shoes. Just terrible news and news that they've fought their way through. And I've got to imagine on any given day, he's probably not having some good days still. I don't know. Like, it's great to come to the rink, but there's another side of it. So to be able to manage that, for his teammates to be there for him, the city has certainly let him know that they're there for him as well. And now to have this success is really good. And I think, too, young players who are talented come into professional sports, and they're always the best players on their team, and they expect instant success. And sometimes you get it once in a while. For the most part, I guess if we looked at the averages of the numbers, it takes a while, and maybe it's a once in a lifetime. So for Rasmus right now, the expressions and I think the words you're hearing from him are the realization that I thought this might come sooner. I'm not saying he's thinking it, but it could be in your head. Well, I thought this would come sooner and maybe a little bit easier than this many years. But now it's here, and I'm really freaking loving it, and I can't believe it's finally here, because we all feel that way. I feel that way in the booth too. And sometimes you're thinking, okay, let's be careful. We're still regular season hockey. We're still in March, but with every single game going forward, and particularly the last two, you're thinking, I'm just going to let it go, because there's something special going on here, and if we don't live in the moment and enjoy it, we're going to rob ourselves of those emotions.
I think you ask most, even hardcore Sabre fans, of name the goaltender, you know, from here to the past, to ever win 10 straight games. You would have said Hasek. You would have said Ryan Miller. You would have said Don Edwards. You know, Jerry Desjardins had the record. Maybe Sauvé. Alex Lyon? Where did he come from? I
love this guy. Love him. Great human being. I know a lot of hockey guys are. Just a really good dude. Very focused, very intense. Details matter to him. The team matters to him. People understanding how good of a goalie he is matters to him. And, probably I'm going to assume, because we haven't had this discussion, he and I, we talk a lot about rock and roll. Bubs, he's a rock and roll guy, so I love it.
Your metal.
Yeah, well, and so does he. So I'm pretty darn sure that anyone who's this good at what they do wants to keep proving to themselves that they are exactly who people now are starting to believe they are. So Alex is a leader in his own way, and he did it again last night. Something for me as simple as coming to a new team, getting this kind of traction so soon, the record that you mentioned. And there was even a shot last night again where he is a good foot outside of the corner of the blue paint, just off the elbow, near side off the boards. And there's just nowhere for the shooter to shoot. He's not he's not Vasilevsky size in goal or Bobrovsky, but man, he covers the space really well. And he just never, ever, ever gives up on a play. And his teammates feel it, they sense it. So, there's just another example of someone playing their position to their best. It's what they're paid to do. They get paid well to do it. They're living a dream. And Alex is fully deserving of everything that he's got coming to him this year as far as accolades, and we'll see where they can go with it.
What about the head coach? There were a lot of people that were wondering, hey, you can't recreate what he did back in his first stint. There were some people that were of the mindset, Lindy isn't a guy that teaches, he can teach, but he's not really good with young players. He's more of a guy that will sit in with veteran coaches. I look at Lindy, and it seems like the same guy to me. I don't know what do you see?
So I've brought this quote up a few times, and we actually played it on a broadcast. It's not a Lindy quote, but I think Lindy feels the same way. I should actually probably talk to him about it, because I keep bringing this up in interviews. But we were in Montreal one night playing the Canadiens, and the morning skate, Martin St. Louis, the head coach of the Canadiens, made a comment talking about, you can have all the young talented players you want, but if those young talented players don't play by the rules, they're not going to find the success as a team that they're looking for. And he said, I don't mean rules by no clutching, grabbing, hooking, holding, or what have you, or, taking penalties. I mean specific rules about how you have to play the game of hockey to win, how you need to play together, things you just can and things you must and things you can't do if you want to be successful. And I remember hearing that quote, and I thought, we need to play that to open our broadcast tonight. I suggested it to our producer. They like the idea of using it for our key to the game. And then the discussion there between Razor and I, it's about, this sounds like the same message that Lindy would have been driving home to his, I don't care how old the player is, from day number one. Listen, been around the game enough. And if anyone wants to think any coach is, the game is outgrown them or something, I argue that to a point. Yes, the players and the personalities can change and the demographics change. That's a given. But the understanding of what it takes to win a hockey game, we're talking about 60 minutes of a puck on the ice. We're not talking about going out and socializing, because we're seeing it now with Buffalo. They're being dragged into a fight. Tampa did the best thing they could have done for the Sabres team, because it proved to the Sabres group that when dragged into a fight, they can hang. And Lindy Ruff, I'm pretty sure, just sat back and thought, I could give 50 speeches, but what Tampa just did and how our guys responded is every speech I could possibly give these guys for that type of moment. There are still coaching moments going on. He mentioned it after the game last night, some things he didn't like in the game. And I think now, because the team has been playing so well and winning, when he sees errors in the game, again, some rules that are being broken, that you can't play that way and be successful against the best teams if you want to get to the ultimate point, which is winning a Stanley Cup, which, by the way, Alex Tuck was the first to bring up in the room. He said, I'm not going to be shy about this. We're not here just to get in. We're here to win the Cup, which was very bold and brave for a team that hasn't been in the playoffs, I understand, for this many years. But at the same time, if you're not shooting for the ultimate goal, what are you shooting for? Mediocrity? I don't think so. So for Lindy Ruff, it's not like hockey's ever escaped his mind and how to play the game. I would probably give him credit, and again, without having talked to him about it yet, I think it's a postseason discussion. did you or how did you either grow your ability to communicate with even a further younger generation of players, or what kind of compromise was there? Just, it's a different discussion to have with him. But to suggest anyone who's played the game and coached as long as them that they don't know what they're doing, I think that's a lazy way out. I think that's people who don't want to put the work in and are just looking for instant success because they're already good at what they do.
Time is the enemy, and I hate it so much. So I'm going to end on this, Dan. I know it was a lifelong dream of yours to become a broadcaster, and you've done so much in your career. And anyone that knows you and your work at the Fan, and as you said, you brought up the Rock, who are, as you know, here in Hamilton now. Your Canadian junior stuff. I mean, you did Olympic stuff. Like you've done so much in your career to build up to all of this. And there was a time there where you were kind of the part-time Sabres guy when RJ, needed a break. But now that you are the guy, you are the man, what's that been like? How's life for Dan Dunleavy these days?
Well, I'll tell you what, I went to the doctor today just for a scheduled visit, and everybody was all smiles to see me, so that was pretty cool. Usually it's just to get the copay, right? But now it's, oh, hey, here comes the Sabres guy. So, no, listen, again, it's honestly, there are emotions within, personally and professionally, that after that game against Tampa, I sat in our broadcast booth and I turned to our floor director, Shady, and my statistician, I beg your pardon, and Rick Maloney, and I said, this is the first time I understand what Ted Darling and Rick Jeanneret experienced in Buffalo. Because in my 13 years having been here, been a full-time employee for those 13 years. As you mentioned, Rick and I shared the broadcast. Well, he kind of just whittled his numbers down over the years. So it's been 13 years of calling games here, and we've had moments, but we haven't had a movement, right? This is the first movement of the needle that I'm experiencing, and it's really cool. And to be honest with you, Bubs, I am trying to manage my voice right now because we're playing, because of the Olympic schedule, as you're aware, we're playing every other night.
Yeah.
So also trying to leave myself some room, and ourselves on the broadcast, some room for where this could go, because you're not where you hope it goes to yet. So as you know, as a broadcaster, you want to bring the excitement, you want to bring the passion. That's already there. You need to leave a little bit of room for when you want to blow that top off of the bottle.
Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it, my friend. I got to throw this in, and if you don't want to answer the question, feel free, because it is about another team. But I know where you live.
I don't hide from questions.
Western New York kind of guy, right? But you have lived in Southern Ontario. You do know the value of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Are you shocked at what you're seeing right now?
Can I tell you, when there was a night here in Buffalo a couple of years ago, it might have been last year, when the Leafs came in, and it might have been 80% Leaf fans in the building. And for a guy that grew up and was born in Toronto, grew up in Georgetown, and obviously was hired by the Maple Leafs and honored to be do so and work for Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment, I don't think I was ever so miffed and perturbed, but also understanding that people can do what they want with their tickets, when there were about 80% of Leaf fans in our building in Buffalo. And I was at that moment, I thought, oh, I've turned the page here. Like, this is all Sabres all in. This is all the time. This is my team. And to see what's happened in Toronto, I think from a Buffalo point of view, you always want the Leafs to be a team that you have the same kind of battle you just had against Tampa. So, and I'll say it to you this way. The other night, Sunday against Tampa, when that game happened, I remember turning thinking, well, Tampa's the new Toronto right now, because that's the battle. That's the heat. That's the rivalry. That's the smoke. Rasmus Dahlin and Austin Matthews tried to turn that rivalry, forward in between Toronto and Buffalo. I know it will always be there for the fans. I always want to see every team play well. I don't like it when teams are at the bottom. I think this has been really good for hockey this year. Obviously, the Sabres have gotten to a point where they're in a really nice spot. But even when they were not in a playoff spot and still, within 6 or 4 points, but at the bottom of the standings, you thought you were still in it. And I think that is so good for the game. It's good for every young fan out there who, I remember growing up as a kid sitting watching Leaf games, and they were out of it the second month into the season. And, my parents would ask me, why are you watching these games? This team is awful. But you were young. You were a kid. You loved the games. I wanted to watch Darryl Sittler and Lanny McDonald and Borja Salming, and Alan Bester and Ken Reagan, all these guys. You wanted to watch them. It was a big deal when Dan Maloney got there. So I just think it's good when everyone's good. So I hope they're not floundering for too long, and I hope that the rivalry gets the same kind of steam that it's had over the years, and we just keep rocking the building when they go toe-to-toe.
Well, I've been to my fair share of Sabres and Leaf games, especially in the Below, and boy, yeah, you're right. The heat is unbelievable. You always know, Leaf guys are going to travel well. They're going to be wearing their blue jerseys, and I know a lot of those games that especially in the days where I was down there a little more often, Sabres always ended up on the right end of the score sheet. So I was always really happy.
I gotta apologize. Yeah, I need to apologize to you because it's getting awful dark in this room. There are thunderstorms about to roll off Lake Erie here. It's gotten about as dark as 6:30 in a January day. So I apologize for that. Look at a silhouette on screen.
No reason for apologies, my friend. But, I do want to offer you thanks. And thanks to the Buffalo Sabre fans out there. It's great to see them so rejuvenated. They have a hockey team that I don't think is on a run. I think this is something that's going to last for many seasons, as you've certainly proven out with your analysis of the players and what is going on in the situation. And Dan, I'm glad to see that you're enjoying the run as well too. You certainly deserve it after all the time that you've had in there, and losing ain't easy. We all know that, but to hear your voice and hear that enthusiasm makes me, as a Sabres fan, and I think any Sabres fan around, a hockey fan in this area, glad you're doing so well, partner. Enjoy the ride.
Appreciate it. Still not as good as my 3-on-23 pick days, but that was pretty consistent.
Well, that'll be a good joke between you and I.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Thanks,
all right, partner. Thanks for joining us. All right. That's your Sportsline Podcast for the day. And if you've just seen and heard, we love talking to real good guys like Dan Dunleavy and talking about those Buffalo Sabres. Hey, if you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote, the Sportsline Podcast do want to hear from you. Please hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. And if you have something to say, go Sabres, go! Please comment. For the outstanding people that make the Sportsline Podcast possible, thank you so very much. And we'll see you soon.